My name's Gene Pizzulo, and I graduated from Cranbrook in 1951 in painting. Yeah, Zoltan Sepeši, who was also the director at that time. He was a painter, and he painted mostly in egg tempera. And he actually wrote a book on egg tempera that's quite decent. When I was in Cranbrook, everybody wanted to paint like William de Kooning and Jackson Pollock or something like that, and including myself. And since leaving there, I've gravitated towards working from nature, particularly initially drawing outdoors. When I got out of Cranbrook, I realized I couldn't draw, so I decided to draw. I remember my kids were small, and I'd be in the yard with them, and I thought, well, I'd better draw, but there's nothing here to draw. So I said, I'd better look a little closer, you know. There were leaves on the ground, there were clumps of grass, there were piles of rocks, so I started drawing those things. And anyway, over the years, my painting caught up with my drawing, and that's still the kind of sequence I have now. I mean, I start drawing, and I end up. Although I paint outdoors a lot now, so I like in the good weather. I'm going out now painting in the Arboretum and the landfill over here at the which was the old dump, and I like that because I can see the sky. Natural, figurative work, particularly landscape painting, and trying to do that and to keep some of the process and some of the form of abstract expressionist painting and some of the kind of energy of that. I taught at the University of Washington for, well, some 40 years almost. And I taught in painting, and I taught drawing, and I taught developed a course in the materials and techniques of painting. I think my group of people were the last that studied with instructors that leaned heavily on historical methods and techniques and so on, and we learned painting in fresco and egg tempera and wax and egg oil emulsions and all the kind of things. And
did you get into like grinding your own oils?
Yes, we got into grinding our own oils, and I still, in fact, have my pigments down. I don't grind my oils, but I use because grinding is a rather time-consuming effort, particularly in oils, but I use them for egg tempera. By the way, when I went to Cranbrook, I had no money, so what I did was to buy large stores of pigment, and every night before I went to bed, I would grind some oil. And I ended up going to Cranbrook with a set of large tubes of paint, to last me for all the time I was there, and then some, actually. What do I remember? Mm-hmm. Well, I remember mostly the people that were there. We had a student body. It was essentially very cosmopolitan, very international, and they were a very serious group of students, which I think characterized that sort of characterized Cranbrook more than the physical facilities there, which were certainly, great. And some of those people I became friends with and remained friends. Some of them have died already, but in fact, one of the friends that I had there is going to come and see me next week at Cranbrook. Yeah, Kurt Feierholm, who was also a painter from Buffalo or Rochester, New York. I got a full tuition grant from Cranbrook, but I had to work, and I worked down at Woodward Avenue in Birmingham in a gas station. So most of the people that were there knew me as the blue Sunoco fellow, because I was wearing the blue Sunoco uniform. I worked for a fellow named Dick Worthley, who was a captain in the ambulance corps. And he ran his station just like he ran, the ambulance corps. I mean, everything had to be polished and no grease on the floor, I mean, it was, and always busy. You never were, So I spent, unfortunately, I didn't spend a lot of time that I could have, or I should have, because I just didn't have it with a lot of the other students. And our daughter, who you met already, was born at Cranbrook, actually. So it was in 1950. Well, actually, a lot of the people when I went to school were older because we were all veterans.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Pretty much everybody was a veteran, and that's what characterized both the Cranbrook experience and even the undergraduate experience at Wisconsin, was the fact that here were a bunch of people that had survived the war, some of which kind of realigned themselves, educationally. I know in my case, I was expected to become an engineer, and because my parents were immigrants and they wanted me to do something respectable, and so I decided to go into painting, which of course that was not in their eyes, my family eyes, very respectable, and so on. So anyway, but I think that characterized all the people then, and they were very intense, and they were very interested in learning. They were. I mean, we know how to have a good time too. I mean, that was that too. But it wasn't like going as a kid into college at age 18. There were a couple of other married people there, and as you know, at Cranbrook, there's no housing for married people, and we had people living in the most ridiculous kind of places. I was able to go down to Birmingham and rent a large apartment on Maple Avenue there in the middle of Birmingham, and it was very big. And I remember everybody, when they were looking for a place to stay, they said, "Oh, go see Gene, he's got a spot." So they'd come down, I'd put them up for a week or 2 weeks or whatever they needed, because we had this enormous space. Yeah, I was I was the guy with the big apartment. There were a lot of people there. They were living in garages, converted garages and all kinds of. In fact, there was one guy there that one couple there that they lived in a house that was half burned out, and they lived was inhabited still, but was half burned out, and it was one of those rather pretentious kind of things that had niches, and it had marble sculpture in the niches and stuff, except it had no roof on it. So, and one of the fellows there said, "Boy, those people really want to live together badly." They put up a tarp, and now Cranbrook was cold at Cranbrook. There was snow there. As I said before, I taught for almost 40 years, and I've learned it's very hard for them to listen to where you're at without seeing what you do. So I think the best way I can pass anything on is by the kind of accumulation of my work and the kind of way I spend my time, and so they can see the concentration, and they can see the result, and then they can see how that might or might not opt into their case, But I find that a lot of people, particularly as my work gets older, a lot of people that are younger do respond to it. So, and and they know where it comes from. They know that I go out and work, and they know I draw from the model. I have a drawing group that I've been running for 45 years at least now, and it's still, I think, the oldest continuous figure group on the West Coast, pretty much. I've been in here since 1972. And then this used to be the master bedroom. I made it into a studio. But I've always had a studio outside of the house for large paintings, and also for oil paintings and things like that. And I occasionally like to do wax. Yeah, this is my sort of generation wall, where I generate new ideas or some personal things too. Like I'm a mushroom hunter, and up here airplanes I flew in World War II. Yeah, that was actually that's what I ended up with, B-25, yeah. You can see all the stuff I have that I draw with. These are some of the tools I draw with here, and a lot of the tools I draw with are natural things. Like, for instance, this is a elderberry reed, and this makes a rather interesting kind of line here. Let me get my bottle of ink. So this is just a natural thing that I broke off, and sometimes I like to just break things off like that and use them without getting too fancy about it, because every stick has its quality, you know. For instance, you know. That's a elderberry that grows all over the place, and it has a pith all through the center, which is interesting. These others here are called wild parsley, and they're a weed, so they're very hard to find in a place like Seattle, where people are always out there getting rid of the weeds. So this makes a rather nice pen too. Sometimes I sharpen it like this, so that you can get a... And sometimes you can get dry effects with these too. You see, you can kind of get...
Oh, yes, yeah.
And sometimes when they're big like this, they're just sort of... Sometimes I just sort of put down something like that, you know, and look, and sometimes that's the best one could do, and or sometimes just a big blot, which is sometimes got a little more visual truth in it than a lot of other fancy things. And then I have a lot of sticks here. These are Alaska cedar sticks. Yeah, they make a kind of regular, more ordinary kind of line. There we go.
I also noticed that you have reels.
Yeah, the feathers are, I have a couple of eagle feathers. I haven't drawn with a feather in quite some time, although all the time I spent in Italy, and a lot of the time in Greece, I drew with a feather. The thing I like about the feather is that as fast as you can go, it will go. You can't, you know, with some things, when you go really fast, sometimes when you kind of move like that, it won't take, but this does. And it has a lot of these sort of irrational kind of accidental effects here. These are Canadian goose feathers that I keep following the geese around, usually in about June, and that's when they drop their feathers. And then, of course, there are all these brushes and so on. And I'm always doing things like I make up my own here, like this one, for instance. Well, one of the things I like to use particularly on my large tempera paintings, is a sponge. You know, I put it on with a sponge. I kind of get the pigment wet and wet it in egg, and then with a sponge kind of move it around, and sometimes that makes a very nice line. Yeah, this is a piece I did this morning of the Grand Coulee. The Grand Coulee, or the scab lines. You know, the eastern part of the state is geologically very unique, and it was formed by this enormous mass of water that resulted from the melting of the last of the glaciers at the last ice age. And there's an interesting story that goes with that, with the guy that there was Harlan Bretz that discovered this. And so anyway, the Grand Coulee was formed by those, they were successive floods, and the only problem was they didn't know where all that water could possibly come from. The figure they give is like 10 times the combined flow of all the rivers in the world. That's a lot of water.
Right, it was held back by...
It was held back by the glaciers up there, by roughly where the Columbia and Spokane River is now. But then the big supply of it was up in Montana by Missoula, which they call Lake Missoula, which is one of the three big prehistoric lakes. There was Lahontan, Bonneville, Missoula. And this was an enormous lake. If you go to Missoula and you look about 1,000 feet above Missoula, you can see the shoreline, the mark of the shoreline up there. I like the dry country a lot. And this is another one. I did both of these this morning. I'm a great pirater of things. I pirate my own work. I mean, that one is pirated from this drawing here. And the drawing, in a way, is better in that it's more elegant, but the painting in color does provide some things that this doesn't. So this was from 1996, and this is 2004. So I'm a great repeater. I like to go back and find something and then do a new variation on it to go to a new place. Yes, right. That one is again from 98. These are current, by the way. These are like a lot of the things in my show. This multiple image here is kind of, or what I call vertical image, is something I just concocted recently. And there's another one of the triple kind of it's like one landscape of essentially perspective view. And one of the places where I really got aware of this was up in Alaska. I go to Alaska at least once a year. There's a place up in Sitka called Halibut Point, and it's sort of it's a real point. I mean, in the sense that it's shaped like this, and you go out there and you can look this way, or you can look that way, or that way, or that way. You can look at least 270 degrees. You can look. So the whole idea of what are you going to paint? You're going to paint this, or that, or that, or that, or that. You got like. So I try to find a way to put all those together, kind of, and shove them up or stack them in some way. They weren't meant to be a landscape, although this one is turned into one of this kind of what I call the vertical landscape here, which is sort of two shots at the same thing in a way, or one shot of two different things. It evolved from calligraphy. In other words, rather than to worry about landscape and all the trappings, you kind of use the reed to get some kind of idiosyncratic kind of shapes.